According to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are 8.1 million jobs available throughout the United States, fueling headlines of a national labor shortage. And yet it takes an average of 6 to 8 months just to land a job, with 62% of Americans now living paycheck to paycheck. Raising the question, why does society insist that no one wants to work anymore? While the concept of work has taken many forms throughout history, predominantly centered on seasonal agriculture, it fundamentally changed with the introduction of the Industrial Revolution, where community-driven, task-oriented workdays, largely consisting of only 4 to 6 months out of the year, were now replaced by relentless year-round factory schedules, demanding 12 to 16 hours a day from people of all ages, shifting authority from the family setting into centralized factories that introduced rigid hierarchies, tying productivity to physical presence, and stripping workers of autonomy while forcing them into grueling conditions, ultimately leading workers to organize and create the first national labor union under the slogan, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what you will, which prompted President Ulysses S. Grant to sign an executive order in 1869, establishing an 8-hour workday for federal employees, laying the initial foundation that would eventually become the modern workweek. Meanwhile, conditions in the private sector continued to worsen. By the end of the late 19th century, manufacturing employees worked an average of 100 hours a week, with some industries demanding even more. The dangerous and monotonous nature of factory work left many workers dissatisfied, causing high turnover rates that disrupted production and created significant challenges for employers. It was in this environment that Henry Ford in 1914 addressed an exceptionally high turnover rate of 370% by implementing a strategy of raising wages to $5 per day, more than double the industry standard, while introducing a standardized 40-hour workweek, as Ford believed that shorter hours would lead to greater efficiency, as well-rested workers would be more focused and motivated, while higher wages would allow employees to afford the very cars they built, fostering loyalty and satisfaction among his workforce. And although many critics mocked Ford, predicting his decision would bankrupt the company, the day after the announcement, 10,000 workers lined up for the chance to work at Ford, willing to overlook the monotony of assembly line tasks for the improved pay and working conditions, stabilizing Ford's workforce and not only introducing the middle class, but setting the stage for FDR's the Fair Labor Standards Act in 1938, which officially established the 40-hour workweek in the United States and ensured shorter hours, overtime pay, and minimum wage protections for workers nationwide. While this period unquestionably brought transformative changes that greatly improved working conditions and established critical labor protections, it also introduced deep structural issues that a booming post-war economy managed to obscure. By the late 19th century, as industrialization continued to reshape society, alongside growing resistance from the working class, John D. Rockefeller established the General Education Board to address the increasing demand for a disciplined and compliant workforce to meet the needs of factory production. Rockefeller's efforts focused on creating educational systems designed not to foster individual creativity, but to train workers for industrial environments. His advisor and co-founder of the GEB, Frederick Taylor Gates, expressed this by stating, "We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers, or men of learning, or men of science. The task we set before ourselves is very simple as well as a very beautiful one: to train these people as we find them to a perfectly ideal life, just where they are." Where by prioritizing productivity and obedience over autonomy, these efforts reinforced industrial hierarchies and laid the ideological foundation for a labor market defined by control, delaying the recognition of systemic problems that would inevitably resurface.
How was my working life at Ford? I've never been to hell, but heard a lot about it. It was like working in hell. The harassment, the threats, the working conditions, and the continued watching over you by what they had called at that time starmen.
Where over time, these unresolved issues have become increasingly visible, leaving a labor market constrained by outdated structures and a workforce that feels increasingly disconnected and undervalued. Specifically when it comes to the utter disaster that is applying for a job. Unlike previous generations, who predominantly secured jobs by applying in person to help wanted ads, the introduction of technology and global competition has fundamentally reshaped how people find work. Today, 98.8% of Fortune 500 companies rely on application tracking systems, or ATS, to filter and sort resumes through automated criteria before a human ever reviews them, where up to 75% of resumes are rejected automatically, often for minor deviations such as employment gaps, unconventional formatting, or missing keywords, where these inefficiencies are compounded by a complete breakdown of traditional hiring practices. Historically, hiring managers worked closely with seasoned recruiters to craft accurate job postings that reflected the true requirements of a role. Today, this process has shifted to HR departments, where 40% of US companies now outsource most, if not all, of their hiring processes to recruitment process outsourcers, or RPOs, who often rely on subcontractors. These subcontractors, in turn, use AI tools to draft job postings and screen candidates, with 40% of companies now using AI for initial interactions and preliminary evaluations, where as a result, job seekers must first pass through the ATS software, then be screened by AI tools, and undergo initial interviews with third-party recruiters who often have very little understanding of the company's needs. If they then advance, they face HR screenings before finally meeting the hiring manager, assuming that the company is actually hiring for the role, resulting in a process that takes an average of 27.5 days per role, with only about a third of US companies actually monitoring whether their hiring practices led to good employees, where this chaotic nature of the system is exemplified by one particularly ironic example. When Sebastian Ramirez spotted a job posting that required 4+ years of fast API, however, Ramirez couldn't apply for this role since he only had 1.5 years of experience, because he was the actual creator of fast API. And this kind of misalignment between job postings and reality not only alienates qualified candidates, but also illustrates how far the hiring process has veered from its original purpose, leaving thousands of unemployed or underemployed workers to become completely discouraged with the labor market, if not potentially leaving the workforce altogether, just because of the difficulties in applying for a job. And we haven't even mentioned ghost jobs. According to a workforce analytics firm, Revelio Labs, an online job listing in 2024 is only half as likely to result in a hire as it was in 2020, signaling the explosive growth of ghost jobs as a corporate strategy, where in a survey conducted by Clarify Capital, 50% of hiring managers admitted to creating ghost jobs to maintain a talent pool for future needs, while 70% reported keeping job postings open for over 6 months. This illusion is further perpetuated by AI-generated recruiters on LinkedIn, which engage candidates with fabricated resumes and work histories under false pretenses, where a study by the Stanford Internet Observatory uncovered 1,000 fake profiles tied to more than 70 companies, inundating job seekers with misleading outreach. Resume Genius estimates that LinkedIn alone may host as many as 1.7 million ghost job postings in the United States alone. Meanwhile, Standout CV reports that over a third of job postings in the UK remain active for more than 30 days without any hiring intent, highlighting the global scale of this issue. Where ghost jobs also serve another potential avenue to rake profits, as American journalist Bob Sullivan highlights that Equifax, with the help of thousands of HR departments across the country, has built one of the most powerful private databases of Americans' personal information. Weekly contributions from 75% of Fortune 500 companies and 85% of federal agencies include data such as social security numbers, birth dates, salary histories, and healthcare coverage, while simultaneously recruiting costs remain entirely tax deductible under federal acquisition regulation 31.205-34, as long as a listing meets the technical requirements of a legitimate job posting, which is almost impossible to prove against, which creates billions of dollars of incentives for companies to perpetuate ghost jobs, conduct superficial interviews, and fabricate listings indefinitely, creating a cycle that not only alienates job seekers, but also leaves thousands of unemployed or underemployed individuals disillusioned with a system that feels rigged against them. Leading me to my final point. Similar to the workers leaving Ford as a result of the monotonous and soul-sucking work of the assembly line, today's workers face a similarly challenging reality. During Ford's era, wages of $5 per day provided workers with a transformative lifestyle upgrade, enabling them to afford homes and cars and financial stability of the middle class that in many ways justified the toll of their labor. Unfortunately, today, the economic landscape has shifted dramatically, where between 1979 and 2024, productivity has surged by over 80%, yet wages increased by only 29.4%, leaving inflation-adjusted wages growing at a mere 0.2% annually, a substantial contrast from the 1950s, where a minimum wage worker could cover a month's rent with less than a week and a half of full-time work. And by 1956, with the federal minimum wage reaching $1 per hour, equivalent to $11.77 today, it provided enough income to support a two-person household above the poverty line. Today, nearly 1 in 10 US homes were valued at $1 million or more than double the share in 2019, where meanwhile the median home price has reached $420,000, where even the cost of college, which traditionally offered career advancement, climbed from $394 in 1970 to $10,560 in 2020, where every single year we all realize that our purchasing power is ultimately less than the year prior, where since the 1970s, the dollar has lost about 95% of its value, making the bare necessities feel completely out of reach for many. And as we begin to conclude, for me to give a topic like this justice, I believe that we have to look at the question, why does nobody want to work anymore? Different than the way that we continuously hear about it and the way that we think about it in ourselves. No matter what, we've all found those times where we're driving on a late Tuesday and traffic is extra heavy, or you're on a walk and you see a bunch of people also walking, and you think, does nobody work anymore? What I'm attempting to do with this channel is to show the ideological reasons we think of work being work, or the reasons that we have led to this point with these systemic issues, with all of these many different components. With this one in particular, the way that I'm trying to get us to this destination is to look at the reason of what it is that, the reason why we're doing things. So you buy a car because it's supposed to get you from A to B. So say the Model T, that was incredible. It got you from A to B. But now with all of the many different cars we have, what value is it really providing past the satiated need of just getting me from A to B? The reason that I say that is this whole entire script made me think about that story of the fisherman that all he loves to do is he loves to fish. And he brings his fish home, he feeds his little village or his little community, and that's what he does day in and day out. An American businessman goes over to him and he says, wow, it's great what it is that you're doing. You know how much money you can make doing this? And then he breaks down how if you do this and you sell an extra fish, then you're going to be able to hire an extra person. And with 2 people, you can do even more fish. And you scale the business. And then he says, and then you can retire. What are you going to do when you retire? And he says, I'm going to fish. And I think I butchered the heck out of that story. But the point of the matter is, when you realize that for the majority of human history, the way that we are biologically wired is not the way that we work now. And that isn't me just trying to say, oh, everybody should work from home or whatever that people are going to try to project. What I'm trying to say is that the system that we are working at isn't working, and it didn't work 100 years ago. The only reason the workers came back to the Ford factory was because the wage doubled. Now, I guarantee you, for any employers watching, double the wage, you're going to have more than enough good workers there. Now, I would argue that as a nation, we need to be increasing wages. It's unbelievable how stagnated it is. And we continuously keep chopping the feet of our businesses, of our infrastructures, to try to get some level of efficiency or some level of, cutting the bottom line to be able to make sure that the stock price is good and whatnot. When in reality, we're forgetting what Henry Ford said. I want to be able to give time to the worker so he can be more efficient, and give him money so he can buy my product. We are squeezing this lemon out so tight that soon we're not going to be able to have the ability to consume the products that we're working for. Now, when I talk like that, largely I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the person that has judgments already on this topic. But I feel like what the issue is now is that at some point, there was a time in history where you were working maybe for your lord or for whatever, but you were working in the little area that you had granted to you. Work was designated around meal times, with almost always, historically proven, a nap was calculated in there. That is for a fact. Then at some point, we hit this unique stream of economic prosperity here in the United States. And while work was not necessarily fulfilling, you had the national sense of unity through the Cold War and just coming out of World War II. But you also had wages that could basically buy you anything that you wanted, as long as you just literally worked hard and saved money and sacrificed. Then we come to the baby boomer generation, where that begins to deteriorate. The baby boomer generation worked more than the silent generation, and you can see that their priorities started to fixate on the material goods. It was less about the community aspect. Gen X was the first generation that worked less than their parents. And what you can see is that this is following in the same historical pattern time and time and time and time again, because it's not working. And I think really I'm just trying to give an extra talking point in this discussion of, why do people not want to work anymore? It's not people don't want to work anymore. It's that you don't want to work for a job that's paying you nothing. You don't want to go spend all of the time that you have to then come home and eat 5 beans and a Frito because you can't afford anything else. That's just common sense. You also don't want to work for something that maybe you are making good money, but it is so soul-sucking, it's unbelievable. I think also we're in a time where we need to be respected more. I think as an individual, we are being attacked by all of these ideologies, all of these beliefs we're supposed to have, all of these different things that, hey, I kind of just want to be seen as a human being. I just want to be seen like, maybe if I know my job doesn't matter, I at least feel like I'm appreciated in some way. This is going to sound like complaining. I'm not complaining, but when I first got hired at the bank at 18 as a teller, my raise at the end of the year was 10 cents. So a dime, 0.10. 5 years later, after my first year really performing as a banker, the top producer in my branch, if I wasn't capped. So because I was at a lower tier, I was capped. If I wasn't capped, top producer. My raise was 11 cents, 0.11, a dime and a penny. The person that had been working there since I was born, with kids a month younger or older than me, his raise was 14 cents. So this isn't, I'm being entitled. This isn't an issue with me. This is, hey, we're all getting hosed. And for some reason, it's better to point fingers than to say, hey, we're being hosed. We're all being hosed. That was one of the reasons why I quit my job. I told my manager, I will never be able to afford a family working here. And he couldn't comprehend it. And that's simply just because of the generational divide. He had that ability to already buy a home. He already had kids. But for me to come out, I can't do anything. I literally can't buy anything. My only hope was creating this channel when I had 500 subscribers. I don't know. I think I've thought about this conclusion so much because I really wanted to give it justice, but something that just keeps reoccurring in my head is that it feels like we're now living in a life with a preconceived agenda that this is what you're going to do. And if you make a slight mistake, or this is what you're going to do, and you have a chance of doing what you want to do, but if you make the slightest mistake, it is so incredibly difficult to not do what you are being forced to do. I don't know if that makes any sense, but yeah, love this topic. Love what we're doing with this channel. Got a lot of podcasts coming out soon. Yeah, just going to keep working hard. Let's see. It is 5:50 in the morning. I will be getting on another plane here in 3 hours. Light just went out. I don't know. It's an exciting time. It's an exciting time to keep trying to make a difference. It is needed. I'm going to do the best that I can continuously. One thing I just want to say before I conclude is that I keep getting comments saying, please don't end up becoming like these other YouTubers, which I think is like the illusion of maybe selling out or something. I just want to say, I will never do that. And I promise I am doing this to make a difference, to provide value to the person in front of me. I don't care about, it's like that song of what's the point of being rich if you're not eating at the table with your friends or something. Butchered that too. But the point of the matter is I want to bring everybody along with this journey. It doesn't matter if I'm making an extra couple, whatever. I just want to say that. It's important to be stated. There's no point in me being successful if everybody else is hurting. So anyway, I'm going to go get a little bit of sleep. And I look forward to talking to you guys again soon. Until next time. Bye-bye.
We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars. But we won't. We're slowly learning that fact. And we're very, very pissed off.